The Jets got a new addition to the roster this week, and we want to learn more about it. Hey, more offensive linemen, as far as I'm concerned, to protect Aaron Rodgers is good news. Let's learn more about him from a unique path from the UFL. Let's discuss.
Zoinks! It is unequivocally the Super Bowl for New York Jet fans.
Field Yates, baby. Field gosh darn Yates. Let's bring him on the show.
Come on, people. Connor Rogers is joining the show. What's up, Connor? But Trevor gosh darn Sycamore, baby, for me, personally, my favorite New York Jet of all time.
Wow, it's great to be on. What an intro that was right there.
Paul, nobody does an intro like you, man.
Paul, you give the best intro of literally any podcast that I've ever been.
I'm gonna lose my gosh darn bananas.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Paul Eston Jr., a.k.a. Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com. Welcome to Boy Green Daily, a daily New York Jets video show, also available wherever you get your gosh darn podcast. And yesterday, we had Cole Lavel on the show himself to talk about all kinds of things for 40-plus minutes on the show. You guys could check that out in the audio and video section. But now it's time to discuss that player with a guy that's covered him in the league, the United Football League. And we do that with one of the best in the friggin' business, baby. Let's bring in James Larson of the Pro Football Newsroom live on the scene. James?
How's it going, man? Thanks for having me on.
Of course. And thank you so much for carving out the time. And I think, quite frankly, we really want to, first off, learn more about the league in general. And there's a recent merger, and then there's an inaugural championship, and there's been a lot of leagues that have been kind of hanging around there. So I guess we'll start there before we specifically get into Cole here. What is the current state of state as it pertains to spring football leagues and obviously this merger that just occurred?
Yeah, the state of spring football right now is pretty strong because last year we had the USFL and the XFL that were competing with each other, and both did well in their own regards, but it was clear they were kind of hurting each other. Spring football, let's be real, it's not the biggest scene on the planet. So to be able to have these two leagues come together with the infrastructure they created between Fox Sports, ESPN, ABC, Disney, and all those partners on the XFL side, such as The Rock, Danny Garcia, Redbird Capital, all these pieces coming together. Now you have one big super spring league, and that was on full display this year on the UFL. The TV ratings were fantastic. Everything went really well in the playoffs. Every single playoff game had at least 1.1 million viewers, which is pretty solid for spring football. And the games themselves are very exciting. The product was by far the best it's been in the scene so far. And heading into year two, it's just looking to get bigger and better.
Let me ask you about that. So they decided to merge, that is the USFL and the XFL, to form the UFL, which is the United Football League. You said that they realized they were hurting each other, being the USFL and the XFL. I ask you, so they just said, hey, instead of fighting against each other, let's work together. Was that just the purpose from that perspective of being, we've had spring football leagues come and go in success and failure. The first XFL iteration way back when, where it flopped out, they just wanted to ensure the longevity of it, essentially, by joining forces?
Yeah, that's basically what it was because, spring football right now, there's kind of a ceiling on how many fans you're going to have and how many people are actually going to be interested. And if you're splitting that group between two different leagues, I mean, it's going to be tough to survive for both of them because football is expensive. Like, these leagues have been putting in a lot of money to make this happen. And clearly that's why these leagues have come and go in the past, is because they just can't stay afloat financially. So it was really important for these leagues to put aside their differences because they were competing with each other. And it definitely took certain people on certain sides to swallow their ego and swallow their pride a little bit and be like, all right, look, I think it's time that we come together and unite, and because we both have the same vision of making spring football a legitimate reality for these players, these athletes, and for the fans for years to come. And that reality won't happen unless we decide to join forces.
Yeah, let me ask you about that vision because again, I ended up I actually set up the interview with you first here today. I'm like, wait, can't wait to Dr. James Large about Cole Lavel. Very interested. And all of a sudden, I didn't realize I had a mutual friend with the agent, and bing, boom, bam, Cole Lavel's like, boom, I want to come on the show. I'm like, okay, let's do it. And all of a sudden, he's on the program. But I was talking about it a little bit with Cole yesterday. Is the vision from the UFL, this now new united front here together? Is their plan to do the successful season they had and then to have what has transpired over the last week, where it's been a pipeline from the UFL to the NFL? Players have been signed left and right to join 90-man rosters. We still have training camp, which is about a month away from that, where these players, is that something they wanted to happen? Are they a little bitter, like, geez, we're losing all our guys here to the UFL? What's the mentality from the UFL on that pipeline?
They are very pleased and happy with this pipeline. This is exactly what the league exists for because they know that no one can compete with the NFL. Like, this is not the XFL of 2001 where Vince McMahon is trying to go head to head with the NFL. It's not like that anymore. They realize that the place for spring football is really to help develop these athletes and try to get them back to the next level. So, of course, the UFL is a standalone professional league and they want to have their own identity, but at the same time, they want to work with the NFL, not against the NFL. And I think the ultimate goal would be to work out some sort of legitimate partnership with the NFL at some point. I think that's kind of what these investors and what these people are thinking, where if we can build up this league big enough, if we can see enough of our guys going to the NFL and proving to the league that, hey, look, we have talent here that we're developing, let us help you even more. I think down the road for the longevity of the league, it'd be really helpful to see the NFL actually partner with them officially. But right now, that is exactly what this league wants to do, is helping these guys get to the next level. That's what it's all about. Last year, the USFL and XFL sent over 100 guys to the NFL's ranks, which is pretty dang impressive. So we're definitely expecting more of that this offseason. And as you're talking about, I mean, we've already had like a dozen guys sign contracts, dozens more getting workouts, and that pipeline will continue here for the next couple months.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious here for like, I guess, so we could prognosticate for a second. So, as we're just kind of swimming in these waters, that there'd be like a G League like effort where every NFL team, in theory, would have their own UFL team to develop talent and be a practice squad of sorts, and they'd have action going on here during this time where there's not action, and that kind of helps out some of the younger players from a development standpoint.
Yeah, it would be something similar to that. I mean, at this point, we don't have 32 UFL teams. We have 8. So
Right.
you have to figure
Yes.
something out, maybe one team per division type of deal, which,
Oh,
by the
okay.
way, is something that the UFL has in place in a different regard, but depending on which free agents from certain NFL teams which free agents from certain NFL teams that got cut that can be signed to UFL teams. There's a whole structure with that behind the
Mm,
scenes. But to get back to your point, the NFL had NFL Europe back in the day, back
right.
I'd say 15, 20 years ago, where they were able to utilize that sort of pipeline and send guys to those European teams that they want to see develop. And there were some big names that came out of NFL Europe. So basically, I think what the UFL would love to establish at some point is something similar to that, just it's on American soil.
Interesting. Well, that would be compelling, no doubt about it. Again, we're speaking with James Gosh darn Larson here for the Pro Football Newsroom here on the show, and learning a little bit more about UFL for our fans in here that may not know about the merger and everything else that's happened, and specifically Cole Laval, which is a player that the Jets have inked. So let's get into that. He was an all UFL guard this past season. And I saw in your little story here, James, I'm taking a gander that Laval had the juiciest, biggest contract of any UFL player so far. Is that true?
Yes and no. It
Mm.
was up until a couple of other guys signed yesterday. And
Ah,
for Cole, this is his first NFL opportunity, and the standard contract to offer someone that hasn't been in the NFL yet is a 3-year, $2.8 million deal. So we've seen it. There was a couple other players, a couple guys from the Birmingham Stallions. They're making their first NFL appearance in a training camp, so they got the same deal. But either way, I mean, it's a big deal for Cole. 3 years, and if he can prove himself here in training camp, it's going to be looking pretty nice there for himself after playing in the UFL the last couple of years.
Yeah, we'll get back in the call in just a second. I know our good pal Mike Mitchell here on Twitter saying, "Good morning, guys. Love when the worlds collide. The Jets and UFL. James has done such a great job being an advocate for spring pro football leagues. The space needs more people like him, and I'm glad to make his virtual acquaintance here on the program. There's no doubt about that. So, okay, it was, that's kind of like, in the NFL, you're the highest paid wide receiver for 5 seconds, and then someone else kind of trumps you. So at least, you can hang that check up in the room. There's no doubt about it. So tell us a little bit about the path here. So Cole Laval is in the XFL initially, which transforms into the UFL with the San Antonio Brahmas. What has his run been like the last 2 years?
Yes, real quick, I gotta shout out Mike. Mike Mitchell does a ton of incredible work in this scene. One of my friends here, and he does phenomenal stuff. He's inspired me to do what I do. So shout out Mike. I appreciate the kind words. For Cole, this is a guy that he took a very interesting route to the XFL in the first place because he was playing arena football. This is a guy who played his college football at Hawaii. He played well. He had some great moments, but again, there's so few spots on an NFL roster that even if you're starting in a lot of games, like for Cole, he was a starter at Hawaii, comes out, doesn't really see any NFL attention. He ends up going to arena football, playing with the Frisco Fighters, plays well there, and he's able to get an opportunity in the XFL with the San Antonio Brahmas last year. He ends up starting in 8 of the 10 games, plays well, but he's the type of guy that you could tell he needed a little bit more development. So he's in the league again, this time in the UFL, where there's even more talent because we went from 16 teams between the USFL and the XFL down to 8. When you have that type of merger where you're losing 8 teams, you're losing a lot of talent, but you're also gaining talent in the same regard because now you just have the best players on those 8 teams and the fringe guys are no longer there. So with that in mind, for Cole to have started all 12 games this year for San Antonio and be such a key piece of their offensive line, they had 2 of the best running backs in the league, Anthony McFarland, John Lovett. Their quarterbacks between Chase Garbers, Quentin Dormady saw a lot of success. Would not be possible without the upfront play. Andre Guerrero, their offensive line coach, talked nonstop this year about Cole and just his development and the way he was able to really utilize this platform to just get better as an athlete. And I think that's why he's getting an opportunity now with the Jets.
Yeah, some of the advanced stats on PFF had Cole exclusively at the guard position, left or right, at this UFL/XFL level over the last 2 years. But we had a YouTube super chat yesterday during the Cole Laval conversation, but I didn't get a chance to get to it. And someone was asking whether his experience at center and snapping the ball, because I saw some of that during his time at Hawaii.
Yeah, I don't think he did in the UFL or the XFL, but
Okay.
if he does in the past, I mean, I'm sure he did. Like you mentioned, I'm sure he did at Hawaii. What I find most fascinating about Cole and the season that he had, where he earned all UFL honors, very few offensive linemen gave up 0 sacks this season, and Cole was one of them. And mind you, he didn't just play in the regular season; he had 2 playoff games as well between the semifinals and then playing in the championship against Birmingham. No sacks given up, and across that span, only 10 quarterback pressures. That means that in 12 games, you're giving up less than 1 quarterback pressure a game. I mean, you can't protect your quarterback much better than that.
How much more is there to Cole Laval because of this unique story? He's 26 years old. He's getting his first NFL opportunity right now. He was at the city of the city of College, San Francisco in California. That's a mouthful. And then he had the time at Hawaii as well, where he's doing again this unique path to football. And then he's in the indoor football league. And then he's now here in the XFL/UFL. Now he's finally in the NFL here. He's a different rookie, quote unquote, in a weird way to say, as he's coming to the NFL. What more is there to his game? You mentioned the no sacks this year, and it looked like, according to the PFF data, not even a sack the year prior either. So it looks like he's been going pretty well there. What more is there to Cole Laval from that perspective, from a ceiling perspective?
I think for Cole now, it's what's next, and how can he prove that he developed his game enough in the UFL to now stick? Because now he's got to prove himself in a 90-man training camp with the New York Jets. Can he go out there and can he establish himself as one of the premier guards on this team? And for Cole, it's going to be an uphill battle, like it's always been. And I think for these spring football guys, they're always trying to prove the world wrong because a lot of these guys have been written off. Cole, I mean, that's a guy that didn't get an NFL opportunity, had to go play arena football. I'm sure he's had plenty of people or just seen media talking to me like, Cole, yeah, he's just not going to fit our team. He's not good enough for this level. he's gone out here now these last couple of years and proved everybody wrong. He's played at an elite level here in spring football the last 2 years. So now for him, it's all about translating that success to the highest level, which is the NFL. And this will really be his make or break stretch. Is he going to have to come back to spring football, or is he going to be able to use these last few years as the catalyst for an NFL career moving forward?
Yeah, and I was reading in your column, one of your quotes was you described Cole as one of the hardest workers you'll find in the scene. What makes you say that?
For Cole, he had such an interesting offseason where while he was with the San Antonio Brahmas the last 2 seasons, the Brahmas were a completely different team in 2024 compared to 2023. Because of the merger, San Antonio's head coach Hines Ward and his coaching staff, they ended up leaving the league, and Wade Phillips and his coaching staff took over from the Houston Roughnecks back in 2023. So for Cole, he was one of the few guys that was actually protected from the Hines Ward Brahmas roster that made it back on into San Antonio, basically. So Cole had to go into training camp and had to prove himself to a brand new coaching staff, an entirely new team, and find a way to make himself that guy on the offensive line, despite not having any familiarity with the coaches, the staff, and most of the players. They only kept several guys from that Hines Ward roster. So, for Cole, he had to put in a ton of work to make sure that he earned that spot and maintained it throughout the season.
Yeah, and I just saw this from Cole. He let me know this yesterday when he measured in for his physical earlier this week. 6'6", 335 pounds, and to your point, he said he's most comfortable at guard because that's what he's been playing the last 2 years. That sounds like a big boy, James. A very big boy.
He is a big guy. I saw him a couple times in person at these games, and yeah, he's a giant.
Wow. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And also in your piece, you talk about there was a legitimate NFL interest from a lot of teams. So James or Cole here, which is interesting that he doesn't get any NFL attention initially coming out of, high school, ends up going to JUCO college and all those routes, and then doesn't get any interest. Now, after this run where he's all UFL and all this other stuff, all of a sudden, whoa, the attention is hot. He's the hot girl at school. Everyone wants some Cole Lavel here happening on the show. What more can you tell us about that based on your reporting?
Yeah, there was multiple NFL teams looking at Cole. He had contracts from a few, and the Jets just seemed like the best fit. That talking with his agent and just Cole and where he wants to be, the Jets felt like the best spot for him to potentially earn a roster spot on the 53-man roster, because clearly, that's the goal of doing this whole thing. You don't want to just come into training camp, have a couple months, and then get cut, or even, if you can end up on a practice squad, that's great as well. But ultimately, these guys, they want to get game film, and they want to play in the NFL. That's the whole purpose of going through the last couple of years of sacrificing time and money to play in spring football, where you're not making a lot of money in the UFL compared. You could probably go out and make more of the day job. So for these guys who have sacrificed their time and their energy and just the commitment of these last couple of years, now it's time for Cole to try to take advantage of this opportunity, and they felt like the New York Jets was the best fit.
The thing I love about Cole, because again, I just met him yesterday after everything came together very, very quickly. Like I said, friend of a friend. Hey, Cole Lavel. I'm like, oh, sure. Agent. Boop, 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 boop. Let's do an interview. I'm like, all right. I was at the water park with my daughter, but okay, time for a Cole Lavel interview. So I just met him yesterday, and during the interview, we're talking about kind of him getting the call, and it's speaking to his father and his brother as he finds out, oh boy, I'm about to be a New York Jet. And I'm like, oh, did you shed some tears? It sounds like a pretty emotional moment. He's like, no, we'll shed tears when other things happen, like making the roster and stuff. I'm like, oh, is that your next goal? And he was like, no, my next goal is to start at either left or right guard for the Jets. And I was almost like like, whoa, okay, the confidence, there's a swagger there. Like, I just assumed, oh yeah, like making the roster, that's your goal. It's like, no, my God. And he said it straight. There's no joking, no laughing. He was dead serious. Like, that's my goal, is to start at left or right guard for the New York Jets. So it sounds like he's got some chutzpah.
No, absolutely. And that's what you need, especially when you're trying to prove yourself. You have to have that confidence. You have to have that belief, because really at the end of the day, for a lot of these guys, you might be the only person that believes in yourself. There's a lot of people that might doubt you, that don't think you have the skills, that don't think you have the tangibles that it takes to make it to the next level in the NFL. So for a lot of these guys, they have to keep believing in themselves. And again, put in that work, make sure they're committed to just continually showing up day after day and improving. And anything's possible if you continue to put in the work.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to open up the phone lines. If you have a question for James for of the Pro Football Newsroom, here we can talk more about Cole Lavel. I can answer some Jet questions. You can also answer some stuff about the UFL if you have any questions about that league as well. That is the pinned comment on YouTube. We're streaming live right now to over 300 people on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Make sure you guys hop in the room. Again, heavy on Jets, youtube.com/boygreen25 and Twitter at boygreen25 as well. But if you'd like to join the show, you must do so on YouTube. That is the pinned comment and pinned message to do so here. Also, can you explain this real quick? So Cole Lavel ends up getting all UFL. How many players, what does the all UFL kind of quote unquote roster look like for people that earn that nomination?
Yeah, so it's really you're picking one person from each position to win that award. So Cole was one of two guards to earn that award.
Wow.
And he was one of just a few nominees that were even on the ballot to be voted for. So for Cole, it was pretty clear from the get-go that this was a guy that the league viewed very highly and definitely expected to earn NFL interest.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that I find interesting that you mentioned again that Cole was here last year, quote unquote, XFL. A lot of things switch over, and he has to prove himself to this roster. What do you obviously the talent and all UFL, so the results are there, but I'm talking about beforehand to be able to impress the Wade Phillips staff and everything else. I heard him, Wade Phillips, after one of the games, preaching up Hakeem Butler as a guy that has to get a chance in the NFL again after everything he's seen. So, and Wade Phillips is a guy. He's a legend. He's been around the game of football forever here. What do you think was the thing that impressed, or obviously that Cole made enough of an impact, not only to make the roster, but ultimately start, which led to this NFL opportunity?
I think for Cole, it was him again just earning it in training camp and putting in the work and showing up. And for him, he said, I think I have a quote here in the article where for him, he put in so much work alongside his teammates to really just fine tune the little kinks and to make sure that he was playing at the highest level possible. Because there's so many, I haven't played offensive line. Look, I'm 5'4". I'm not an offensive lineman. But there's when you start analyzing offensive linemen and you're watching them play, just so many fine little details to their game because the tiniest of mistakes could end up in a sack, could end up in just the line breaking down as a whole. So for Cole to make sure that he's playing at the highest level possible, it takes not just physical attributes, but it takes a lot of mentals as well. Like the mentals have to be top tier. And I think that's what Cole was really able to prove this year.
Again, yeah, Cole Lavel is listed at 6'6", 355 pounds. That was, or 335, I do believe. Let me get sure. Yeah, 335, 6'6", 335 was his official measurements at his Jets physical earlier this week. And again, I'm 5'3" on a slanted hill. So, there's kind of a gap of action here happening between Cole and myself. There's no other way about that. Again, everybody, the call-in line is available. That is the pinned comment on YouTube, so feel free to hop on that. And going back here to you, James, as those are coming in and we're filtering those through, I'm kind of curious with where it was before, where it was the two leagues in the XFL and the USFL, and now we have this opportunity in the UFL. How did it change for you because again, I imagine you're covering all the leagues and then all of a sudden now you're covering this. Again, in some senses, there's less teams, so less opportunities, but more because the quality has now increased because it's getting shoved in a lot fewer slots with it only being 8 teams, which should obviously have, and as the results say, the quality of football as well.
Yeah, I mean, things at least got slightly simpler for me because now instead of covering 2 leagues with 16 teams, I was covering 1 with 8. So it was absolutely chaotic during the whole process of the merger because the merger took a while. They had to get a lot of different things approved through the government agencies and all of that, which took time. They had to spend time figuring out, okay, what are we going to take from the USFL? What are we going to take from the XFL? So that was a process that went on for a few months of just not really knowing exactly what was going to happen throughout the merger. But once that settled down and this season of coverage compared to last season was definitely a little bit simpler on my end because, I could focus in on just the 8 teams, the 1 league. I wasn't worried about 2. And the thing about last year was where we had a few weeks of overlap between the 2 leagues. So that was hectic because you had 8 games a week instead of just 4. So there was a lot of action, a lot of moving pieces, and I'm grateful for it all. But definitely, I think, for spring football, we knew, those of us who were in the scene, we knew that at some point they had to come together. So I'm glad that they did come together when they did, because otherwise we might not be talking about Cole Lavel to the Jets right now, because there could have been a chance that these leagues didn't even play this season if things didn't come together the way that they did.
What's the ceiling for the UFL? You talked about some of the ratings at a million a pop, which is spectacular for all things considered for what we have going on here with spring football in general. Where do you think it could get to? Because it was a successful season in that obviously it finished, and there's a championship game, and there's sponsors and partners and everything else that supported this league. There's a pipeline clearly here from the UFL, the NFL over the last week. It's been, I can only imagine your phone blowing up with all of these news bits and things that you have to cover. It seems like by all counts it was a success, but what more is there to accomplish?
I think for the UFL, it's about taking the next steps forward to making sure that they're getting themselves established in their respective markets, where because of the merger and because of just so many moving pieces behind the scenes, certain markets just had issues when it came to attendance and ticket sales and marketing and things like that, which all those things weren't necessarily the league's fault in particular. It was just a matter of circumstance. And, in certain instances that weren't able to sell tickets in specific markets until right before the season really started. So the attendance, for example, in Michigan and in Houston and in Memphis, a couple of these cities, it was definitely lower than what the ceiling could be. So I think for the UFL now that you're one league, now that the merger's behind you, these next several months of the offseason will be really important to make sure that the league is doing everything they can to smoothly make sure they're establishing themselves in all these markets, make sure they're marketing themselves properly, because they definitely dropped the ball on a couple of those things last offseason. Again, I don't want to blame them too much because, again, the merger is so complicated and there's so many pieces behind the scenes that we just don't know about with everything that happened. So for the league, I think the next step forward is let's get that independence levels up and make sure these cities are actually getting behind their teams and supporting them, because these are some damn good football teams.
Yeah, 100%. It's certainly proven to be that case. Are there any? I don't know how closely, James, do you follow the NFL?
I follow it pretty closely, unfortunately, as a Minnesota Vikings fan, so I'm not usually talking about the playoffs, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. So, by the way, I'm building a different studio right here, so I'm using this one for now, and then eventually this is all going to flip when everything gets rearranged. I'm staring right over here at a Sam Darnold, like a
Oh
little
boy.
autograph thing. So he's on the draft stage. The first thing he signs when we got off the draft stage is sitting right there to my right. So, good luck with the Sam Darnold experience,
I
by the
can't
way.
wait to watch him overthrow Justin Jefferson 5 times a game. But anyways,
It's picturesque. It's picturesque. You're not going to want to miss it. It's going to be spectacular. I'm looking forward to that. And hey, Jets Vikings play week 5 this season in London. That should be a doozy. But the reason why I ask is I'm kind of curious because I don't know if everyone appreciated what this was, but there are rules that were in the XFL, USFL, ultimately now the UFL, that people said, ooh, that's a kind of a cool. It's almost like in baseball. One of the other jobs I have is I work with the Syracuse Mets, or the AAA affiliate of the New York Mets, and there are rules that they being baseball implements in the lower levels. Test it out, see how it works, goes through some of the spin cycles, go, ooh, let's bring that up to the majors. Booyah. Okay, that was a success. There's been a little bit of that, again, although the NFL doesn't sometimes want to admit that some of those things are happening, that some of the rules in the other leagues that could translate to those. Are there any on your list that are things that have been a success at the UFL level that you think could eventually translate to the NFL from a rules perspective?
well, the main one that I'll point out is we're already seeing a rule change in the NFL this year with the kickoff. And they're
Mhm.
using a kickoff that's very similar to what the XFL used back in 2020 and then also in 2023. And really the entire point is the NFL clearly has been trying to get rid of the kickoff the last couple of years in particular, because injuries are a real thing and they are a real issue, especially on kickoffs where you have high speed collisions and things of that manner. So the XFL kickoff really allowing for returns. And for a lot of them, we had over 90% of them in the XFL last year, but you had way less injuries. And really, the way it's set up, it's a little tough to explain, but you're basically making sure the players aren't moving until the action really starts. And it allows to make sure, for one, a lot more returns, and two, a lot more safer returns.
So let me ask you about that because I think there are a lot of fans in my audience. Again, we're over 350 people in the room right now, live, and then of course we have tons after that'll be watching this after the fact. And I'm curious that have not seen what this new kickoff is going to be, and they have no idea. And there's a lot of fans I know because, like, I got some of my family that deplug as soon as the Super Bowl's over, like, all right, I see you in September. And then they go to September, like, and they're going to see this kickoff. They go, "What the hell is this? What happened? What changed while I was gone the last couple of months?" It's going to freak people out. As someone who's covered it in a different league, a version of it, the same thing, whatever you want to call it. Like, how would you explain that to someone who's never seen it before in terms of the disparity from what it's going to be versus what we've had for a very long time in the NFL?
It's going to look a little bit funky. It takes a little bit of time to get used to. You got to see it a few times to be like, okay, what is this? This is a kickoff? Like, what are we doing? Because the kicker, he's the only guy on his own side. And the return teams, they're both within the opposing team's territory. They're lined up 5 yards away from each other, and they cannot move until the ball is touched or is on the ground for 3 seconds. So it allows the returner to pick up some steam, but it really means that the players that are going to go tackle him, they're basically already down there. So they're not running full speed to get down there. They're already established there. And really what the point of it is trying to do is, again, for safety reasons, making sure the players aren't running full speed at each other head first. It kind of allows them to already be there ready to make a tackle without the high speed part of it, I guess, for lack of a better term. But it's funky because, again, you have the kicker at his own like 30-yard line, and everybody else is on the opposing 35 or 30-yard line. So there's a good 35, 40 yards of just green grass.
All right, let me ask you about this because a lot of fans have speculated what this could look like that have not seen the XFL stuff. They're just hearing the NFL. Here's the rules, and we're all like, "Oh wow, what's this going to look like?" One of the things people have kind of compared it to is you have those essentially two lines of scrimmage of these trench warfare that's going to go at each other outside of, again, the players are in the landing zone and the player that is in the kicking zone, that they've compared it to a cover zero blitz. And for the less inclined, I mean, you're set in the house and there's a wave, and then once you break through the wave, there's nothing. So is that true that you have these clashing forces going at each other, and then it sometimes could be return or kicker? How often does that happen where it's mano a mano? It's those two bastards against each other. The kicker normally, I don't want to, stereotype kickers, but less athletically inclined, typically, the return man who has a little bit more in the tool bag.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, teams and coverage teams will scheme to make sure that those things don't happen, which I think will be really interesting to see how that translates into the NFL, where, the XFL special teams coaches kind of have that in mind, where now the NFL guys have to do the same. But yes, there was a couple instances where the returner found open space, and next thing you know, he was gone. We saw that in the XFL a couple times. The UFL was kind of intriguing this year because they decided to go away from the XFL kickoff, and they used the USFL kickoff, which is a lot closer to the traditional NFL kickoff. So it was kind of more comedic timing than anything that the UFL chose a more NFL-like kickoff, and then all of a sudden the NFL is like, "Oh, we're gonna use a XFL kickoff for this season." So the way that worked out was pretty hilarious. But yes, the XFL kickoff, if you can get a guy into open space, if he can find that hole and get through it, he's gone.
And let me ask you, this is another thing that coaches have kind of openly talked about. They're not sure the answer. They're debating, coaches and players even, what's the right type of returner for this new setup? Is it a guy who could shed a lot of tackles? Is it just an Olympic athlete, which, again, we're just kind of talking about, where you break through and it's just a 40-yard, much larger, but like a 40-yard dash to try to get to the end zone? In your experience, is it the speedster? Is it the breaking tackles guy? Is it, the politically correct answer, which is anything in between? There's a conversation for both, or is there a lean one way or the other for what is the more appropriate for this style of kickoff?
I think you're going to see guys that are going to be a little bit more on the speed side and a little bit elusive, because you want somebody that's going to be able to find their way through this trenches of warfare and kind of squeeze and get by and do what they can. And a great example of that would be Darius Shepard, who played with the St. Louis Battlehawks. He was a special teams player of the year in 2023. He also had a lot of success this year in the UFL but he was so crucial on those kick returns, especially in the XFL, just because of his ability to weave through traffic and to find a way to find those holes. And there was a couple of times where he broke off big returns of 60, 70, 80 yards in the XFL. And really, it was his elusiveness that I thought helped him become such an elite player at that level on special teams and earned him that award.
All right, two final things before we get you out of here, James. Number one, is there anything we missed on Cole Lavel that Jets fans should know if they don't know already with this guy who, again, signs this week? It was officially late yesterday, officially on the transaction wire of Cole Lavel becoming a member of the New York Jets. Is there anything Jet fans should know about him or his journey?
Well, this is a guy that, at Hawaii had played some really good football. He was just one of a few offensive players to start all 13 games during his senior season. He was an honorable mention on the All Mountain West team, and he allowed just one sack that year. So for him to allow just one sack his senior season, then hop to the XFL and UFL and give up no sacks, the last few years, Cole Lavel has only given up one sack. I mean, that speaks for itself. That's a guy that really has put together an impressive resume here, and I think that should definitely translate to some NFL success.
And the final one here is on the UFL. Mike Mitchell was kind of talking about it earlier as it pertains to these clashing of worlds that are now merging, which is spectacular for football because I love football all the time. So spring football, summer football, any season football, I'm all in. But for all the people, the near 400 that are watching live right now, do you have anything to say to them as we're here in this world where we're kind of getting the Venn diagram a little bit? These worlds are now kind of clashing together here, and it's awesome. And hopefully this is not just a one-year pipeline thing, that this is a natural thing that can come together, which goes back to our earlier conversation of eventually an official partnership between the two where, there's some stake on both sides beyond what's happening right now.
Yeah, I think my message would be that for the UFL to survive, it's going to continue to need support. It's going to continue to need people to get behind it and be like, okay, this league has some really good players. And, from someone who's been covering this scene for the last few years, there is so much quality talent, and the product on the field is really, really solid. I know sometimes spring football can get a rep of it's second tier guys, it's guys that couldn't make it to the NFL. A lot of these guys are players that either you watched in college that were really, really good, or guys that were in training camp that looked like they had a lot of potential, and then a little injury, a little hamstring tweak, and they get an injury settlement and they get cut, or politics play a role. I mean, I'm sure you've had plenty of guys who have spoken about that on this show of just the things that happen in football. So, for spring football to be where it's at right now, it is reaching new levels that we haven't seen in years prior. And I think it'll just continue to get better and better because we're seeing players, and a couple of them this year were, for example, Alex Magoo in 2023 with the Birmingham Stallions. He ended up winning MVP that year, secures himself a contract with the Green Bay Packers. He's been with them over the last year. And then there were some NFL guys that saw that and they were like, okay, I'm not on an NFL roster right now. I'm going to head to the UFL because I see that as a potential chance for me to get back to the NFL. For example, Adrian Martinez comes into the UFL with the Birmingham Stallions, who are really a dynasty at this point with 3 straight championships. He ends up winning MVP. Definitely see him going back to the league. So I guess, spring football is here to stay. It's doing really, really well, and it needs the support of us. So.
Well, support given, support granted, baby, and more support to come, I'm certain, especially with, like I said, all the latest developments and evolutions of what has transpired. James, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning. That was awesome, man. And like I said, I'm looking forward to more, you kind of connecting the pipeline. Keep sending UFL players to the New York Jets, and we'll have you on every gosh darn time, baby.
Sounds good. I appreciate you having me on, man.
All right, there he is. James Larson of the Pro Football Newsroom joining us here on the show. And I see that Jared B. and a couple of questions coming in. Jared B. says, Paul, how come Cole didn't have to enter the draft like Stiggers did? Is it because Stiggers was in the CFL? Well, Cole entered the draft. He had a full college career. He had 2 years at the city. Let me make sure I say this right. I need to make sure I get the right vernacular here. The City College of San Francisco in California. That's a lot of vernacular there. He was there for 2 years, then went to Hawaii from 2018 through 2021. So he was there for a long time in college and school. And then he entered the draft and his name was not called. So then once that didn't happen, he started going to professional opportunities, which was, like I said, the Indoor Football League, and then ultimately the UFL, the last XFL first, and then they merged, and then that was UFL. So UFL, XFL, Indoor Football League, now here, getting his first opportunity at the age of 26. So that is why, for people that are curious, he did not have to do all that for that. And if you guys have any final questions, feel free. There is a pinned comment on YouTube, and I'll answer any final questions you may have. And also, as in any of those coming in, that's great. But I just want to say on Cole Lavel, it was an awesome interview. He's the latest member of the New York Jets. It was a wonder and an awesome experience getting a chance to talk to Cole yesterday for 40-ish minutes. I hope you guys could check out that conversation. It's both in our live section, video section, and podcast section if you prefer the audio-only version. And it was an absolute pleasure learning about his story. It's a unique path. He's got a lot of confidence. He's got a lot of swagger. I'll be sharing a few shorter clips both on social media and the YouTube video section, so you guys can check out some of those on a variety of topics like The Rock and his interactions with The Rock, which was kind of funny, and other things of that nature. But I'm rooting like hell for Cole Lavel. He's a very talented player. And not every path is the same, man. And you can not only do anything but respect that. That's so friggin' cool that this guy chased his football dream. There's special moments when he got the call from the Jets, when he shared that call with his father and his brother. Like, there's so many great tear-jerking moments during that interview, which I hope you guys could check out. Plus his versatility. I know we had a super chat from Nate yesterday, and it is true. I want to make sure I go back to that as well. And sorry, I was trying to go on an arc of a story of questions, and he ran out of time, but he does have center snapping experience. He has actually started in all 5 positions throughout his collegiate career, so he has a ton of versatility, which is incredibly interesting. From whether it's his time at the city of College of San Francisco in California, or at Hawaii, he's had left tackle, left guard, right guard, and center. And then, of course, most recently, he's most comfortable, as he told me yesterday on the show, at guard, because that's where he spent the last 2 years. And, he has somewhere in the ballpark of like 1,000 snaps over those 2 years, something like that, I believe, both playing at left guard, right guard. Most recently, he has been serving at left guard for what was the San Antonio Brahmas before he came back over here. So either way, it's been a spectacular story, for Cole, and I'm rooting like hell for him. These are the stories, and hopefully we could dig into a couple more of these before we get to training camp, where you guys can learn about some of these other players on the roster that are fighting for their opportunities. We know about the big guys, and this roster is really talented for the New York Jets, so it's going to be very difficult for other people. There's not many spots up for grabs, is basically my point. 5, 6, 7, maybe that much at the bottom end of the roster of people trading this place and this place, because the roster is so freaking talented. It's so freaking stacked. It's going to be hard to crack that lineup, but if anyone could do it, Cole Lavel might just have a chance, because the Jets have been looking for a guy just like him to provide some of that additional experience. Mike Mitchell was mentioned earlier, could be fighting with that spot for Xavier Newman. Obviously, they got rid of an offensive lineman to even bring him in, so that's more good news. Last year, the Jets kept 9 offensive linemen on the final 53-man roster, and Joe Douglas went back and said, boy, probably shouldn't have kept 9, as in saying we should have kept 10. So that opens up an even bigger path of opportunity here for Cole Lavel, who has a chance to not only make the roster, but hopefully make some noise moving forward, which is absolutely great. Well, everybody, again, thank you so much for tuning in. You guys could check out a column that I wrote about it. I'll also be doing a more longer form story, hopefully here in the coming days on Cole Lavel, based on our conversation. I'll be putting that together, so I'm really looking forward to that. You guys can like the video. You guys can hit subscribe, and down below as well, like I said, there is a Cole Lavel story you guys can check out. And I see from Jared Paul, is it possible to get your logo without the white square? Yeah, there's a couple of things, like, for instance, real quick, I'm wearing it on my shirt. It's hard to see. I should have got it in production. It's actually right here. You can see the Boy Green logo. I've got a few shirts and stuff that don't have the white block around, just the logo, but it's kind of hard to see. That was a malfunction of it being the jet color too dark and the logo dark. So this is the gosh darn banana shirt I'm wearing. You guys can kind of see this. I'm going to lose my gosh darn bananas. Yeah, I'm wearing that shirt that you can find in the shop as well. But yes, there are several things. For instance, some of the tank tops don't have the white block around logo, but I'll put in more stuff on the shop. Whatever you guys are interested in. And like I said, always let me know in the comment section. I can add more to the shop of things that you guys want. So feel free to check that out. But thanks everybody again for tuning in. We appreciate you. Hopefully enjoyed that Cole Lavel conversation both today with an insider and also yesterday bonus interview with Cole Lavel himself, which again, I hope you guys take the time to carve out. It's a phenomenal conversation. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you later today at 3 o'clock, actually. Let me give that quick plug. We'll be on with James Woody and Nick Faria. He'll be joining us to talk all things New York Jets. So I'm very much looking forward to that. It should be a doozy. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. God bless. And we'll see you later today. Take care.